How do you have African monkeys in Florida?
Okay, GoPro rolling. Microphone rolling. Right. Monkeys introduction, take 1. I'm currently on a walk in my home of Spain, but not that long ago I was in South Florida drinking up a story about how a group of primates have established themselves as a small population just outside of an airport in Fort Lauderdale, South Florida. Now the monkeys are interesting on their own, but what's really interesting is the debate to whether or not we should kill all of them or leave them alive. And that is what I'm exploring for you today. Let's go.
I'm sorry I have to listen to the fan of the air conditioning, but it is freaking hot out here. We're gonna go meet a doctor called Dr. Missy Williams, who is a conservationist and is surprisingly passionate about keeping these monkeys alive.
Turn left at the traffic light.
Now, commonly with invasive species in any part of the world, the conservation policy is extermination. So I'm just totally fascinated by why her stance is this way. Oh my god!
Yeah.
Oh my god, there's loads of them!
Oh, yeah,
oh my god, there's a baby one right there.
Yeah.
Bella, come on! Hi! It's a good girl.
Oh no, I feel so bad.
It's okay. Stick the finger. They recovered just fine.
They recovered just fine.
Oh yeah.
This is Dr. Missy Williams. She has dedicated her professional life, basically, to the protection and education of these non-native vervet monkeys, which live in this ecosystem. She has done an awful amount of work to basically make sure these guys are all right and make sure that they're protected, that they stay within their confined little nature reserve, and to make sure if there any of them spill out and they get injured, that they're brought back into the reserve and housed in an enclosure.
Oh, adventure! Let's do it. I am so... I don't know why I'm wearing this kind of clothing. Whoa. So they'll chase away the lower members of society, of their society. So we've just been through a mangrove forest.
Yes.
In the middle of South Florida, and I'm seeing vervets or macaques.
Vervet monkeys.
Vervet monkeys.
Yes, they're from West Africa.
How? Why? How are they here?
I had the same question when I first started out here. Wait, how do you have African monkeys in Florida? They escaped from the Dania chimpanzee farm in the late 1940s. So it was opened by Layla Roosevelt and her partner Amon Dennis, and they were bringing monkeys in and apes from Africa to use for biomedical trade.
Oh, wow.
And a group of clever vervets figured out how to get out of the enclosure, and they never caught 12 to 15. They got all the rest. I think it was an estimated 50 is what I was told escaped.
Yeah.
So they managed to collect all of them back, but 12 to 15. And so the critters we see out here today come from that group.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. When I first saw the monkeys myself, it didn't really make much sense because traditionally here in the States, you see monkeys at a zoo.
Yes.
And behind an enclosure of some sort. And here they just walk right up to you. So I had never experienced anything like that at all.
How did you discover them? I'm fascinated.
It is a weird story. So originally I was supposed to go to Africa, to Gombe National Park to do my doctorate research there.
Yeah.
And a woman who was born and raised in Miami is in the same lab as I was. And it was just really like a general conversation. And she said, oh, you know, there's monkeys by the airport. I'm like, excuse me, I live by the airport. I've never seen a monkey. So I went home and started Googling, and there's nothing in the scientific literature. It was all like old stories, like Sun Sentinel, Miami Herald, and some tourist posted monkeys on a parking lot. And so I called that parking lot. The woman answered. I said, do you have monkeys? She giggled. I said, maybe, I don't know what's going on, but can I come see the monkey? She's like, sure, come on down. And sure enough, I came down. She goes, walk to the back of the parking lot and just wait, they'll come out eventually. And she was right, they came out.
So, what's the problem? Like, why, okay, you got this population of monkeys, they found themselves living in an airport, they're not native, but what's the big deal? What's the big deal? It's a cute story. Why all the gun toting and murdering? Well, I'm gonna tell you this right now. These monkeys are not from here, I'm taking it.
Right, no, so they're non-native. And that's part of the reason I started the nonprofit for them. So it was during my research, one of the animals was injured. And you saw her today, Jackie. She was an infant then. She's kind of a terrorist toddler, you know. Yeah, that would describe her as a youngster. She was a menace. But she got into some trouble and she was injured. And I called the wildlife center and they said, no, we can't help her. She's not native. I'm like, well, she's wildlife, you know? And like, no, we can't do anything about it. We're not allowed to treat those animals. And it was just mind-boggling to me. I didn't understand, how could you not treat an injured animal? And so I started digging around and doing my homework on non-native issues here in the state of Florida, and it's a big deal. It turns out the non-native invasive issues are big. So I wanted to help the monkeys, and the only way really to do it legally was to open a sanctuary. There's no room for flex from the state as far as, helping them and then releasing them. They just won't do it.
Well, if you're not in the know, especially in South Florida, invasive species are a massive issue. They can cause a huge amount of problems. Now, the biggest issue with invasive species is that if they're left to their own devices and they're not controlled in any way, they can cause serious damage. Pigs and pythons are the perfect example of that. They can easily outcompete other native groups of animals. They haven't evolved to be in that ecosystem, so they either don't have natural predators, or there's not a lot of what has evolved. Not a lot of the animals around them have evolved to deal with them. Pigs spread like wildfire. They come from areas of the world where there's tons of predators, wolves to tigers to whatever, and basically when they've dropped in North America, there's not a lot of animals which are adapted to eat them. Pythons in Florida basically have very little natural predators. Giant alligators, maybe a particularly feisty Florida panther, but there's not many of them left. So they basically have a smorgasbord of South Florida native wildlife. So the reason for this debate about the monkeys and whether or not they should all be killed or not is kind of understandable. If you're a conservation organization or you're a conservationist, you really don't want any more of these things running around. Like, you've got all these pigs, you've got these pythons, you've got these iguanas, and God knows what else is mucking up your ecosystem. It's your job to keep it all in check. And now you've got these adorable little monkeys, which may or may not be causing some serious damage. But what is the argument for removing them?
People, like I said, who are staunchly opposed to any type of non-native being here, they just want them gone. Just get rid of them. And it's just that they have this idea that any non-native is going to do some damage to the ecosystem that they're introduced into. And so I understand it from that perspective. But you do have an example would be the pythons, right? They have no natural predator, so they're destroying it. So I understand the need for something like that to remove a python, because that makes sense. Like, I understand that, right?
So the opinion that I think the conservation organizations hold is that, listen, they're small, there's not a lot of them, you shoot them all now, kill them all now, you're saving a problem that could potentially cause us havoc in the future. And I kind of get that. With the pythons, the pigs, and God knows what else is in South Florida, which is beyond control at this point, and there's another population which hasn't established itself properly yet. There is a case, and a bizarre case, a bizarrely logical case. An extremely logical case for just shooting them all off and being done with that problem. And I hate to say that, but I kind of get it. It makes sense. But I wanted to hear why Dr. Missy Williams, who is a scientist, who is a decorated scientist, has to say on the matter.
Not every situation is the same, right? So I think applying a universal protocol just to completely eradicate and remove something just because they're non-native doesn't always make sense, right? So for example, here with the monkeys, they're not spreading, they're not growing. We haven't seen, they've been here for 80 years, they certainly haven't done any damage to the mangroves. The mangroves are doing quite well, right? So why would you want to come in and remove a population of 40 monkeys who are, to me, are individuals with personalities, have a range of emotions, and certainly they would display fear. It's such a complex animal, socially complex, emotionally complex. Just to kill them just because they're non-native, I can't, that I don't understand. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I think if they're not really doing anything, they're not harming the environment, no harm, no foul, just let them be. I feel like nature eventually just kind kind of balances out, right? And I think we had this conversation the other day when we met that animals have been shuffled all over since people started traveling, right? Essentially, right? And so I think historically animals have been shuffled and they get to where they're not supposed to be, but they fit in somehow, right?
Do you think their lives should be valued?
Absolutely, they're individuals, right? And they all have their own personalities and they matter. So that's a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around too. I feel like the more that we learn about animal psychology and how animals process things, you realize we're pretty close to the way that we look at things, interpret things, right?
It's such a predicament because you have, on the one hand, someone who really, really cares about the individual animals. But then there's the other hand of the story, which is, well, maybe there's potentially these animals could grow out of control and start doing some really damage to the already damaged Florida ecosystem, which people are desperately trying to protect and revive. Both arguments, to me, make complete sense. They make complete sense.
This is a family unit, right? So there's grandmas, there's sisters, and they all interact and relate with each other. So like, you know, if someone came to my house and took my son, I'd be very upset, right? Because they do have a very strong emotional connection with each other. Much happier. Oh, yep. Oh, you know what? You start playing the other way for me. What's going on? Oh my goodness! Your brother has something. I know. What's going on? Happens. Who's gonna go? So excited. He knows. Bad. You're not home. Did you put food in your... I'll get you water bottles coming today.
This is Spock. He was born on this reserve, but several years ago he escaped and was captured, and has been circulating the pet trade ever since. However, recently as of filming, he was surrendered to Dr. Missy Williams, and is now allowed to live in this enclosure where he will be looked after for the remainder of his days, well kept and well fed.
Yeah. But this is like way bigger than his last cage.
Oh yeah, this is definitely much better than his last cage.
Two times.
There's no doubt. This is like Pimp My Ride, but
for monkeys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh, that's funny. There's
Yeah.
none of this grass.
No
in his
foliage.
last
It was
place.
all
mesh, all metal.
Yeah, at the bottom. So this is what's
Yeah.
so nice. Be able to forage. He has
Yeah.
different balconies to walk across. He does have shade here, and it stays pretty shaded here actually. But if he wants to use that one, we can cover that side. Yeah, I'll get right.
The valuing of the individual and the valuing of the ecosystem as a whole, it makes complete sense. And I think the only takeaway I've got from this is that there is a wonderful, daunting but wonderful beauty to this, and is that humans like you and me really just want to do the right thing, and that's all we want to do. We want the right thing, we want the moral thing and the just thing to be what happens in this situation and in a lot of situations. The tricky bit is that morality is unfortunately subject to your own personal opinions and beliefs, but it is wonderful that I think people like Dr. Missy Williams and the conservation organizations, that's all they want to do, is the right thing. At the bottom of this video, in the description, I've linked Dr. Missy Williams' fundraiser. She accepts donations all the time. She doesn't make money off these animals. She's a full-time lecturer at one of the universities in South Florida. So every penny that is given to these animals is given to these animals. It will go to enclosures being built for animals which cannot be released into the nature reserve, so she needs to build those. She then needs to feed those animals who are under her care, and make sure they have enough water and toys to play with and things like that. So please check that out if you're Team Monkey, or if you just care about primates, check those out. I think it's a wonderful thing that she's doing. I've also linked some articles about invasive species that I've personally read and I find useful for you, just so you can understand why people would take such extreme measures against benevolent animals. Let's admit it, these animals haven't done anything wrong. Lastly, subscribe to me. Click the subscribe button, ring that bell. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, the dislike button, the share button. Here's a showreel of all the other videos I've made, and if you enjoyed it and want to see more, please hit the subscribe button because I've got more coming your way. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you again soon. Right, I'm off.